Well, let's talk some more about this. Joining me in the studio here is investment banker, development economist, Dr. Nnaemeka Obioriri. Good to have you join us here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so this started as Make America Great Again. Now it's Make America Wealthy Again. What do you make of the sweeping tariffs?
You know, there's nothing Trump is doing that is so exceptional. Just that is a bit noisy, blustering, swashbuckling, things he could actually done quietly. Globally, anybody who tells that it's free trade or there is globalist arrangement where everybody benefits equally is lying to you. Every nation is a zero-sum game. It's a jungle. Every nation wants what is best for itself and for its citizens. And if you look at the numbers he read out, those some on the outrageous end, the guy is simply saying, we produce things here in our economy. Similar competing goods are produced elsewhere. The guy is simply saying, if we are operating a fair trade environment, I am exporting into your country, you're putting 90% tariff on things I am producing, I have competitive advantage. Then you're bringing things into my country I can actually produce by myself. And I am not giving you tariff at the same commensurate rate. Then we need to sit down on the table to discuss on how we can go about it.
Well, is this really about discussion now?
Trump is always very noisy, very boisterous, very swashbuckling and all those stuff. There's nothing Trump is doing that is not fair in the real sense of it. I'll give you an example. You talk about Vietnam, you talk about Nigeria. Trump placed 14% tariff on Nigeria, imported goods. And you ask yourself this question, what does Nigeria actually produce? And I'll give you an example. Look at the average goods that come in from the US. Computers, buses, things that we can't produce here ourselves. A right-thinking country wouldn't be talking about putting tariff on computers. If I'm a governor or a president, I will not put tariff on computers. Things that I know that can be used productively in my economy, that I cannot produce alternatively. I should be putting tariff on things like palm oil, that I know that in 1965, we controlled 45% of the global palm oil market. Today, Indonesia and Malaysia control 85%, and actually pigs it from Nigeria.
But does America, for instance, import palm oil to our country?
They don't, but I'll give you an example. Between 2003 to 2023, there was what America did. They call it the African Growth Opportunity Act, where they allowed developing economies like Vietnam, like Nigeria, to export things like garments, things like leather, things like apparel into the US, tariff-free. US is noted to consume and import almost about $125 billion worth of those commodities. Nigeria, from Aba to Onitsha to Kano, has the potential and capacity to do as much as Vietnam, almost about $5 billion export annually. But we never leveraged on it for 20-something years.
How should Nigeria be responding to this?
You respond when you are competitively productive. And I tell you this, there is no reason why even the average Kodokwe boss, the average farm equipment, the average computer gadgets that come into Nigeria should even be tariffed. You saw the traffic that was in Lagos yesterday. If we have a working transport system where buses can come to your station here, picking people and take them to their houses, nobody will want to put his car on the road and buy so much amount of fuel to put it, and then there's so much traffic.
But that was an exceptional situation anyway.
I know, but this issue is...
And then talking about buses, we actually have buses that move south.
Like a bus that sells for $2,000 in the US, which if not for the kind of tariffs that we have, you see customs putting 35% on it, 50% on it. If those buses are brought into Nigeria, based on the cost of import from the US, based on zero tariff, we will have a transport system that works, that is very competitive. But the situation where the buses you cannot produce comes in from the US is $2,000 based on Naira equivalent exchange is about $3 million. But by the time the customs and excise department and all the tariff agencies at the port put in that tariff, to land a bus here in Nigeria costs about 10-11 million.
What goods are produced in Nigeria that are exported to the US?
Mostly agro products.
And mostly in their raw forms?
In their raw form, not even the processed forms. So what is this Trump is simply saying, don't be noisy about that. Hey, there are things we can produce here. Right? We want to protect our local industry. We want to protect jobs here. By putting tariff, simply say we can't continue to have balance of trade deficit against you.
So it means that Nigeria too should then, just impose some sort of tariff on those American products that are coming in. If they're also slamming Nigeria with tariffs.
Let me tell you, tariff works when you can produce competitively what you're putting tariff on. When your local industry can actually compete. I give you an example, like in Detroit, Michigan. Most of the car manufacturing plants there are running at 40% nameplate capacity because we can do. It's like somebody trying to import cocoa beans into Nigeria. When you can easily, from the southwest, where you have 19 million hectares of land, you can do over $100 billion worth of cocoa production.
Right, so on a more general, on a global scale now, how will this affect global trade? Because already the EU is warning that this development is a major blow to the world economy with dire consequences.
They should all come down to the table. Forget all this English speaking.
But these are taking effect. Some of these are taking effect almost immediately. So what time will they have to?
It's taking effect immediately. It's very simple. We need to look at the factuality of those numbers. If, for example, US granted tariff-free export for Vietnam to bring in garments into the US, right? And Vietnam, over the last 10, 11 years, have been doing almost about 5 billion export into the US. Nigeria is not exploiting that opportunity. And now you're putting 90% tariff on goods coming in from the US. And the US is simply saying, because of this, I'm putting 45% on you, right? And of course, you saw the Vietnamese government. They were trying to sweet talk themselves, and it never worked. What any reasonable government was okay. This thing he did wasn't necessary. Because what he would have done was he would have quietly called those countries, like the EU. You're putting tariff, 35% tariff on agro-commodities coming from my country. But you are importing similar things from social countries. So can we have a reasonable tariff agreement? Remove tariff here and we'll remove here. But everything Trump, swashbuckling, noisy, creating production out of nothing.
Okay, so.
But in the reality of it, what he's trying to do is to protect the interests of America and Americans. And that should be the responsibility of any government, any responsible president or government at whatever level must first of all protect the lives, the properties, the welfare of their people. So that is what he's doing.
So this is a looming trade war because, of course, the U.S. has influence.
It's an avoidable looming trade war. And remember again, that's what we always say, the consumer is king. Most of these countries, blustering and threatening, cannot compete. The U.S. is the biggest consumer nation in the whole world. They do $20 trillion every year. China does $10 trillion. EU does not even do up to a quarter of that. It's like you and me. You are the consumer. I am the producer. The consumer is king. Trump is doing what he's doing because he understands clearly. Yes, no nation can operate in isolation. But the truth is, based on consumption power, the UST controls the market. So what I expect the worlders to do, rather than everybody granting press conference, talking tough, is to sit down and agree on the best way forward. The man is simply saying, you've been raping my economy, you've been ripping us off over the last 15 years, don't noisy about it. How do we sort it out so that the world does not collapse?
We'll wait to see how it goes, because we know that President Trump has held meetings with the UK Prime Minister, for instance, and one would have thought that these tariff hikes would not extend to a country, an ally like the UK. But Dr. Barry, we really need to leave the conversation now. Investment banker, development economist, Dr. Nnaemeka Obioriri, it's a pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you're watching.